a man sitting in a room in ancient Jerusalem. The year is somewhere around 700 BC. Assyria is the dominant empire on earth. Babylon is still a second-rate city. Persia does not exist as a political entity. Rome is a small settlement on a river in central Italy that nobody outside Italy has heard of yet. And this man picks up a pen and begins writing about things that have not happened yet. Not in the vague language of a mystic, in the language of a historical document. Specific names, specific cities, specific methods, specific outcomes. The kind of language that can be checked. The kind of language that can be wrong. And then across the following 7 centuries, one by one, in the order written, the things he wrote down happen. This is what makes the predictive prophecies of the Bible unlike anything else in ancient literature. They are falsifiable. A horoscope is designed to be unfalsifiable, vague enough to apply to anything, specific enough to feel meaningful. The prophecies of the Hebrew Scriptures are the opposite. They name kings who have not been born. They describe the specific method by which a city will be destroyed 2 centuries before the army arrives. They give a mathematical countdown to a specific event accurate to within a decade. They describe in precise physical detail a method of execution that will not be invented for another 1,000 years. Either this is the most extraordinary collection of coincidences in the history of human literature, or something else is happening. For a prophecy to qualify as genuinely remarkable, it needs to clear 3 bars. It must be demonstrably prior to its fulfillment. It must be specific enough that it would have been clearly wrong if a different situation had occurred. And the fulfillment must be verifiable from outside the Bible, from archaeology, from ancient secular historians, from the physical historical record. Every prophecy we are going to examine clears all 3 bars. Some of them clear all 3 by a margin so wide it is difficult to look at directly. We start with the one that stops people cold the first time they encounter it. The prophet Isaiah was active in Jerusalem from approximately 740 BC to around 680 BC. He lived and wrote when Assyria was the world power and Persia was not yet a nation. There was no Persian Empire. There was no Persian king. There was no man named Cyrus anywhere in the political landscape of the ancient Near East. And in Isaiah 44 verse 28, continuing into chapter 45 verse 1, the text says this, He says of Cyrus, He is my shepherd and will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, Let it be rebuilt, and of the temple, Let its foundations be laid. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of to subdue nations before him, a proper noun, a personal name, Cyrus. Dropped into the text in the 8th century BC, at a time when Jerusalem had not yet been destroyed, when the exile that would require a decree of return had not yet happened, and when no one named Cyrus occupied any position of historical significance anywhere on earth. In 559 BC, more than a century after Isaiah wrote, a man named Cyrus II rises to power in Persia. In 539 BC, his army approaches Babylon. Rather than a prolonged siege, Cyrus diverts the Euphrates River, which runs beneath the city's walls, and his soldiers walk through the dry riverbed under cover of darkness. Babylon falls in a single night. First act of his administration is a decree. Historians call it the Edict of Cyrus. It is confirmed not only in Ezra chapter 1, but on a clay cylinder discovered by archaeologists in 1879, and now housed in the British Museum in London. The Cyrus cylinder, a document from the Imperial Persian Archive with no biblical agenda whatsoever, records Cyrus ordering the return of captive peoples to their homelands and the rebuilding of their temples. The Jewish exiles held in Babylon for decades go home. They rebuild the temple. Every detail Isaiah wrote, the name, the specific action, the outcome for the Jewish people, lands exactly as written. The critical scholarly response has always been the same. The chapters mentioning Cyrus must have been written later by a second author. But notice what the argument requires. It assumes in advance that prediction of this specificity is impossible. The prophecy itself becomes the evidence being explained away by assuming the conclusion. If you allow the possibility that the text is what it claims to be, the evidence stands, and it is only the beginning. In 590 BC, the prophet Ezekiel delivers a prophecy against the city of Tyre, the greatest seaport in the ancient Mediterranean world, sitting partly on the coast of modern Lebanon and partly on an island half a mile offshore. Ezekiel 26 delivers 6 specific predictions. Nebuchadnezzar will come against Tyre. The walls will be demolished. The stones and timber and soil of the city will be thrown into the sea. Tyre will become a bare rock. It will be a place for spreading fishing nets, and it will never be rebuilt. Nebuchadnezzar besieges the mainland city for 13 years. He breaks the walls and demolishes the towers. But the population has evacuated to the island offshore, and he has no fleet to reach it. He takes the ruins. The island survives. The rubble sits on the coastline. 250 years pass. Then, in 332 BC, Alexander the Great arrives, needing to take the island city without a large enough navy for a direct assault. So he builds a causeway, half a mile long into the open sea. Using the rubble on the coastline, every stone from the destroyed mainland city, every piece of timber, he scrapes the site completely bare, throwing the stones and the timber and even the soil into the sea. Ezekiel 26 verse 12, they will throw your stones and your timber and your soil into the sea. Written 2.5 centuries before Alexander picked up the first stone. The peninsula his causeway created is still there today. A physical feature in modern Lebanon that exists because a general followed an engineering plan a Hebrew prophet described before his grandfather was born. The ancient mainland site remains largely unbuilt. Fishermen still use the area. 6 specific predictions. 2 separate conquerors. 2.5 centuries between them. Every one fulfilled. Now Daniel, and the most mathematically precise prophecy in the ancient world. Daniel is a Jewish exile living in Babylon in approximately 550 BC. In chapter 2, he interprets a dream. A great statue with a gold head, silver chest, bronze belly, iron legs, and feet of iron mixed with clay. 4 successive world empires followed by a divided kingdom that never reunites. Hold that against the actual history. Babylon falls to Persia in 539 BC, silver. Persia falls to Greece under Alexander in 331 BC. Bronze. Greece fractures and is absorbed by Rome. Iron, which dominates the ancient world for centuries. Rome fractures into successor kingdoms that never reunite. Iron mixed with clay. Every major world empire from Daniel's day to the fall of Rome follows the exact sequence he described in the 6th century BC. And then, in chapter 9, the precision becomes mathematical. The angel Gabriel gives Daniel a timeline, from the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Anointed One, the ruler, comes there. 183 years. The most historically supported decree is the one issued by Artaxerxes in 457 BC, recorded in Ezra chapter 7. Count forward 483 years using the prophetic calendar the Hebrew scriptures consistently use, and you land in 27 AD. In 27 AD, according to Luke chapter 3, Jesus of Nazareth is baptized, anointed by the Holy Spirit, and begins his public ministry. The word Christ means anointed one, the same word Gabriel used. The Messiah arrives exactly on schedule. Gabriel is not painting a general picture. He is handing Daniel a timetable, and Jesus steps onto the stage of public history at the exact moment the timetable expires. This is the prophecy that convinced Sir Isaac Newton, who spent more time studying Daniel than developing the laws of motion, that the Bible was a document of divine origin. Now, from mathematics to geography, the prophet Micah writes in chapter 5, verse 2, around 700 BC. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Bethlehem is a small agricultural town a few miles south of Jerusalem, unremarkable in every way, and Micah names it specifically. 7 centuries before a Roman census forces a carpenter named Joseph and his pregnant wife Mary to travel there from Galilee for registration. Jesus is born in Bethlehem. When the Magi arrive looking for the newborn king of the Jews, and Herod demands to know where the Messiah is to be born, his chief priests quote Micah 5 verse 2 without hesitation. They know the prophecy. They know the village. The only thing they do not know is that he is already there. And now the one that should stop every careful reader completely. David wrote Psalm 22 approximately 1000 BC. Crucifixion had not yet been invented. The Persians would begin developing it around the 6th century BC. The Romans would refine it centuries after that. David had no framework for imagining death by crucifixion. It simply did not exist. And yet, Psalm 22 describes it with a precision that has made scholars and skeptics alike go very quiet. Verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? The exact words Jesus cries from the cross in Matthew 27 and Mark 15. He is not composing a new prayer. He is quoting a text written 10 centuries earlier. Verse 7 and 8. All who see me mock me, shaking their heads, saying he trusts in the Lord, let the Lord rescue him. Matthew 27 records exactly this, the specific taunt word for word. Verse 14 and 15. All my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. Medical analysis of crucifixion confirms progressive dislocation of the joints as the victim's weight pulls downward for hours. Severe dehydration is a primary cause of death. Cardiovascular collapse, heart turning to wax, is consistent with the documented physiology of dying on a cross. Verse 16, they pierced my hands and my feet. No form of execution in David's world involved piercing hands and feet. This is a description of something that had not been invented yet. Verse 18, they divide my clothes and cast lots for my garment. John 19 records the soldiers at the foot of the cross dividing Jesus' clothing and casting lots for his seamless tunic. Roman soldiers following standard procedure for a condemned man's possessions, enacting to the letter what a shepherd king had written 1,000 years before they were born. The details do not fit a general picture of suffering. They fit one specific method of execution that would not exist for another 1,000 years. Now, the one that is different from all the others. The prediction is not from an Old Testament prophet writing centuries in advance. It is from Jesus himself, speaking in approximately 30 AD about events within a generation. In Luke 21, the disciples admire the Jerusalem temple. Its stones were enormous, some weighing hundreds of tons. Jesus looks at it and says, "The time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. The city will be surrounded by armies. The people will fall by the sword and be taken as prisoners to all nations." Finally, we return to Isaiah one last time. Chapter 53, written around 700 BC, describes a figure called the Servant of the Lord with a specificity so remarkable that the primary critical argument against it has always been the same. Somebody must have written it later. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, the opposite of every Messiah expectation in first-century Jewish culture. They were looking for a warrior king. What arrived looked like a carpenter's son from Galilee. He was pierced for our transgressions. The Hebrew word chalal carries the sense of being penetrated through by something sharp. Not the language of illness or stoning. The language of something sharp passing through a body 700 years before Calvary. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Jesus is crucified between two criminals, the wicked, buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy council member, the rich, both in the same verse, written 7 centuries before. Either happened. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. He will make intercession for the transgressors. Not the words of a figure whose story ends at death, the words of someone who suffers and dies and continues. The chapter does not end at the cross, and neither does he. The mathematician Peter Stoner calculated the probability of just 8 of these prophecies being fulfilled in one person by chance, 1 in 10 to the 17th power. He illustrated it this way. Cover the entire state of Texas 2 feet deep in silver dollars. Mark 1. Blindfold a person and drop them anywhere in Texas. The odds of picking up the marked coin on the first try are the same odds as 8 prophecies fulfilling by coincidence. There are not 8 messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. There are over 300, and here is what all of this means personally. The same God who named Cyrus before he was born, who described the rubble of Tyre being scraped into the sea 2 centuries before Alexander picked up the first stone, who handed Daniel a timetable and stepped onto the stage of public history at the exact moment the number expired, who told his followers what would happen to Jerusalem 40 years before it happened, and in doing so saved their lives. That same God has made promises about your future. His track record is not 9 out of 10. Every promise he made that had a historical verification point has been verified, every single one, across 1,000 years of recorded history, confirmed by secular sources with no interest in confirming a religious text. So when Jeremiah 29:11 says he knows the plans he has for you, that is not a greeting card. That is a statement from the most reliable source in the history of recorded prediction. God did not put these prophecies in the Bible to win an argument. He put them there so that when the moment of fulfillment arrived, the people watching would recognize it. John 14:29. I have told you now before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe. The prophecies are an act of love. God saying, I know you are going to need evidence. I know faith is going to be hard. So here, let me write it down before it happens. Let me give you something to hold on to. Every prophecy already fulfilled is God's signature on the ones not yet fulfilled. And there are still promises outstanding. A new heaven and a new earth. A resurrection morning. A final end to every form of death and mourning and pain. He has never been early. He has never been late. He has never been wrong, and he is not finished yet. If this opened something for you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to see it. Someone who has been told the Bible is just an ancient collection of stories. Someone who has never been shown what it actually claims and what history actually records. That is genuinely how this reaches people. We depend on you to spread the word. Please keep us in your prayers. God bless you.